Warlord's Ruin is the newest Destiny 2 dungeon, and as always for new Destiny 2 dungeons, there is a new emblem you can get for soloing the entire dungeon without dying. Today I'm going to give you the best tips and tricks to solo this dungeon across the 3 classes we have in Destiny 2. If you want to skip to a certain sections of the video, you can find the timestamps in the description below. Otherwise, let's get straight into it. Let's start with general tips for the solo. General tips are defined as tips that are applied throughout this run regardless of which part of the dungeon you are on. When doing my testing for this solo, I found that the adds in this dungeon are very dangerous, and oftentimes you will find yourself to be at critical health. Therefore, you're going to want to have access to a strong source of healing throughout your run. For Titans, I'd highly recommend Banner of War, as the healing is absurd on it. If you're not comfortable enough with Banner of War, then Restoration on the Solar subclass will do you just fine. For Warlocks, I find Restoration on the Solar subclass to be your go-to, although Devour may not be too bad of an option. For Hunters, once again, Restoration may be your go-to. Another general tip for this dungeon is to load up on damage resistance. This means bumping your resilience stat up to 10 and possibly speccing into subclass specific damage resistance sources such as Amplified, Woven Mail, and more. For the final general tip, you are going to want to have a lot of patience for this run. For the first time in Destiny's history, Warlord's Ruin features 3 different boss fights, with each taking several phases to take down, so it's important to stay patient when running this solo. So now that the general tips have been covered, let's open up with the first boss fight. In my testing, I found this boss to be relatively mild across the 3 classes, but one of the 3 classes had a much easier time taking this boss down compared to others, and that class was the Titans. For Titans, I'd highly recommend running the Banner of War build, as despite its nerf it received this season, it is still strong as hell. I've put the subclass setup on screen now, in case you don't already have it. For weapons, I found myself using the Navigator with the Catalyst, a 1-2 punch shotgun, and an LMG, and I paired this loadout with the Worm God's Caress exotic gauntlets, as even though Syntheseps might be the better choice, the larger damage boost and ease of setup for Worm Gods will come in clutch during this damage phase. I made sure to highlight the Navigator has the Catalyst, as without the Catalyst, this loadout becomes a lot less effective. If you don't have the Navigator nor its Catalyst, then running the same build with a 1-2 punch shotgun and Tractor Cannon will be just fine. This combo might seem really weird, but it is by far one of the most effective loadouts for this encounter, as it will allow you to get a 2 phase on the boss if you set it up correctly. The way you want to go about setting up the damage phase is getting Banner of War and Worm Gods to its max stacks of 4 and 5 respectively. Once you've gotten them to their max stats, you want to activate both totems for a longer damage phase. Once both totems have been activated, pull out your Navigator, toggle it to its secondary firing mode, and fire the grapple point into the air. From there, shoot the boss with the 1-2 punch shotgun, grapple to the grapple point, and melee the boss to chunk it down. As I mentioned earlier, this loadout can effectively 2-phase the boss if you are using it correctly. For my Warlocks out there, there's only one loadout that I found to be worth using for this fight, and that is Witherhoard and Sword on Warlock. The build is on screen now, and I made sure to pair it with the newly reworked Apotheosis Veil, as the ability spam you get upon popping your super is insane. The sword I was using was the Bequest thanks to its access to Surrounded, which gives this weapon a 40% damage buff when surrounded by 3 or more targets, which is super free in this fight. I also paired this with 3 times Arc Surge mods, and altogether it came out to deal roughly 2 million damage in my best attempt, putting you in the range of getting a fairly easy 3-phase. There's nothing too special you need to do when going about this fight, so just take the fight as you usually would, and once the imminent Wish timer runs out, pop your well on the boss, spam your grenades and melees, and once the Apotheosis Veil buff is out, Witherhoard the boss and begin slashing the boss, doing a light, heavy rotation for maximum damage. Other than that, you should be cooking fairly easily. For my Hunters, the best way of going about this fight is none other than the combination Blow Arc Hunter build. This build is pretty risky to use, and I found myself getting down to critical health a lot more often than I did on the other 2 classes, but the damage this build offers is too much to pass up on. As always, the build can be found on screen, and you'll be pairing this with the Liar's Handshake Exotic Hunter Gauntlets. For weapons, the only important weapons to note are the 1-2 punch shotgun and Tractor Cannon. For how to go about this fight, it is imperative that you keep your combination blow stacks at 3 for when you enter the damage phase, or else your damage potential will nosedive. Thankfully, this is fairly easy to do with how many squishy targets there are. If you're having troubles getting your melees off on the shielded targets, shoot their legs to stagger them, then melee for an easy time. For the DPS phase, tractor the boss first, then pop your super, and once your super has been popped, you'll want to shoot the boss with your shotgun, then melee twice, then repeat this cycle. Whilst doing damage, keep track of your combination blow stacks, and once they get lower, run in melee and add for a refresh, then go back to DPS. I found this strat to be an easy 4-phase, although you can definitely push for a 3-phase, although I find that to be a little unlikely, but it's still definitely possible. Moving on to the second boss, we are going to start off with Titans, who will see nothing change in the loadout department. I find that the Banner of War build is still the best for this encounter despite how unfavorable the conditions are for a melee-centric damage strategy. Regarding the fight, I would keep Banner of War and Burning Fist stacks up as high as I could throughout the fight. But of those two buffs, Banner of War is the most important to keep up, as this buff is your main source of healing. But this should be fairly easy, as using your LMG to kill the abundance of adds will keep this buff up 95% of the fight. When it comes down to the totem part of the encounter, I found that getting 2 solar charges was the most efficient strategy instead of pushing for more. My recommendation is to start on the left, kill the big guy, cleanse the totem, and make your way to the right, and either kill the big guy or cleanse the totem he may have already spawned. From there, repeat until damage. For the damage phase, I went about hitting the zones in a clockwise rotation, with me putting the navigator grapple points in between the back and front plates, as you can see in the gameplay. Now, if you find this strategy to be a little too worrisome or maybe too risky, then running Solar Bonk Titan with Precious Scars and Witherhorde and Rockets was a decent alternative, although you'll be killing the boss in a much larger amount of damage phases, so that's definitely worth the consideration when choosing what loadout you want to use. For Warlocks, I find this boss to be relatively easy, but you will have roughly 6 to 7 phases that you'll need to do. Regarding the loadout, I found that the Apotheosis build from the previous fight worked here as well, with the main difference being that I ran a linear fusion rifle instead of a sword. While it may seem like a strange suggestion, linears have better ammo economy than rockets do. It will do more overall damage than rockets will do for this fight, hence my suggestion. Regarding the strategy of doing this fight, the main difference between the Titan strategy and the Warlock strategy is that I forced the big guy on the left to spawn a totem before I killed him, so that I could do both totems on one side instead of rushing to the other side, as Warlocks lack a one-shot burst ability like Titans have with the higher Banner of War stacks. For damage, I found myself using the first totem as one to use well and my abilities on, then using totems 2, 3, and 4 for Witherhorde and linear switching, using the healing rift as a way to survive the damage from enemies around you. Other than that, this fight sucks on Warlocks, so best of luck. For Hunters, we have a fairly unique strategy that I saw all the players use, so I left his link in the description below. Anyways, we're going to stay on the Arc Hunter subclass, but we're not going to try and beat the shit out of him. The Arc melee will be used as a way to generate orbs and to help you heal. Instead, we're going to be using the Malfeasance and Lucky Pants duo that was popularized back in Season of the Deep. The way the strategy works is that you'll want to have Malfeasance and a 1-2 punch shotgun on. In my attempt, I used the Without Remorse, but use whichever 1-2 punch secondary shotgun you'd like. For my heavy, I used an LMG, but the heavy honestly doesn't matter at all for this fight, so just use whichever you'd like. Anyways, you want to use heavy-handed to generate orbs, because you'll want to start the fight on Star Eater scales. You'll go about getting to damage similarly to how the Warlocks did, by choosing the big guy on one side, having them summon a totem, then killing them for the second. Once you get to the damage phase, start by popping your Gathering Storm super on the boss and switch to Lucky Pants, where you'll want to spam Malfeasance with the Lucky Pants buff. Having an average damage phase will put you on track for a 4 or 5 phase. However, if you're able to have good damage phases, then you'll be on track to possibly 3 phase, if not comfortably 4 phase the boss. So this is for sure the loadout to use for this fight. Other than that, just take this fight slow and you're good to go. Let's now discuss the final boss, and as per usual, we will start with Titans. For all of my Titans out there, I can confirm that we are once again staying on Banner of War, but we are not going to melee the boss to death this time. Instead, we are going to enlist the help of linears to help chip the boss down. I found this to be the best strategy, as rockets will blow through their ammo too quickly to recommend them, and linears will ultimately offer more viability due to its ammo economy. Now, the reason I chose to run Banner of War over Bonk Hammer is that I found Banner of War to offer a more consistent heal compared to Bonk Hammer, and because of that, I was able to stay alive a lot longer than I was able to do on the Solar subclass. Regarding the loadout, I chose to run a 1-2 punch shotgun, Sunshot for more heavy ammo, and Cataclysmic. Regarding the fight itself, you are going to want to prioritize keeping Banner of War up, as without it, you will get shredded by the adds. You'll also want to keep Burning Fists up, as this combination with 1-2 punch and Banner of War will burst the big guys down fast, allowing you to start on totems ASAP. For damage, I would proc bait and switch on my linear, then immediately turn around, melee a Scion, throw the Tangle on the ground and give me Woven Mail in to take out most of the Scions, then I'd go to focus on the boss. I found that most of the time I would fail to hit the threshold for damage, but this isn't too much of an issue, and will also allow you to farm ammo for Cataclysmic, as you are certainly going to want to, For final stand, I did the same thing as I did throughout the fight here as well. If you were to run out of ammo in your linear fusion rifle, then might I suggest having Malfeasance on standby, as Malfeasance does extra damage towards taken enemies, which is what the final boss is. Overall, the strategy will put you in the range of about a 6 to 7 phase, which is slow, but it is the best strategy I was able to find. For hunters, I found that this fight is not as bad as I thought it would be. We're going to take the loadout from the previous fight and bring it here, but the main difference is that we're going to be running a linear for final stand, and we're going to run Assassin's Cowl for the lead up to the damage phase to ensure that we don't get cooked by ads. This is my twist on all the player strategy for this fight, so once again his link can be found in the description below. Anywho, the way you want to go about this fight is keeping combination below up, as this will not only be your source of healing, but will also be your way of cooking the big guys when it comes time to cleanse the totems. For the actual damage, I had a loadout pre-made, so when damage began, I'd swap to the other loadout, which simply saw me taking Assassin's Cowl off for Lucky Pants, and then I'd throw my super at the boss before spamming Malfeasance. As I stated with the Titan section for this fight, Malfeasance does extra damage towards this boss, which allows you to cook this boss pretty easily. The thing I liked the most about this loadout is that you aren't going to need to farm ammo much, as the main damage dealer of this loadout is Malfeasance, and you shouldn't need to use heavy until the final stand, so the fight should go by pretty smoothly. Overall, this fight should be a 4 phase assuming you do pretty good damage for each damage phase, and you even have potential for a 3 phase, but you shouldn't push yourself too hard for that. Finally, we have Warlocks. For my Warlocks out there, I found the final boss to be a complete bitch to do, but with this loadout we have, it will hopefully make it a little more bearable. We're going to stay on the solar subclass, but we're going to use sun bracers, and we're going to use heat rises to get access to 2 stacks of restoration, which will make your Warlock practically unkillable in this fight. For weapons, we're going to run Riptide, Sunshot, and a linear fusion rifle, as I find this to be the best weapon combination for this fight. Regarding the fight itself, your main goal is to spawn trap scions with solar grenades and to keep restoration up at all times. When it comes down to DPS, you should keep your melee ready, and when scions spawn, you want to get a melee kill, then spam the boss with grenades before proccing bait and switch and doing your best to chip the boss down. There's a 50% chance that you won't be able to push the boss onwards, which is perfectly okay, but you'll be able to get a good amount of damage in. You'll want to repeat this until you make it to final stand, where you just want to go about final stand similarly to how you did the fight, which should help you kill the boss relatively easily. Overall, this should lead you to a comfortable 5 to 6 phase, which for the final boss is pretty good. Overall, this dungeon is fairly easy to get the solo flawless for. I find that Titans will have an easier time doing this solo, while Hunters will be a close second. I do think that Warlocks might actually have a harder time doing this solo flawless, at least to my experience. If you have a build recommendation for a certain fight, then let me know in the comments below, but this is what I could find. Well, that'll wrap it up for today's video. If you found it useful, then be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more Destiny 2 content dropping weekly. If you'd like to support me even further, then consider becoming a member of the channel today. Click join for more information. Finally, if you'd like to see more content from me, then consider checking out my other social media platforms linked in the description below. With that being said, I'm SniperKH, and I'm out. Good luck with gaming.